She texted, "I'm moving in with Jake." I just replied, "Got it," and canceled her credit cards. The decline at Walmart was only the beginning of her downfall. While I found peace and someone bettered, I never thought a single text could flip my entire relationship upside down. But there it was. "I'm moving in with my bestie Jake. Don't contact me for a month." That was it. No explanation. No face-to-face conversation. No phone call. Just a lazy message while I was still at work. I stared at the screen for a full minute, rereading it like maybe I'd misunderstood. Jake, her bestie. The same guy she'd sworn was just like a brother to her. The same Jake who conveniently seemed to show up every time we fought. I didn't argue, didn't rage, didn't even fire back a single angry emoji. I just typed 2 words. "Got it." And then I set my phone down. The funny thing is, she must have forgotten who paid the bills, who covered the rent, who made sure her credit cards didn't bounce when she ordered food delivery every other night, who quietly picked up the tab for her shopping sprees because she needed retail therapy after stressful days that usually meant she'd done 2 hours of work and then 3 hours of gossiping with Jake on FaceTime. By the time I got home that evening, I'd already made up my mind. I walked into the apartment, our apartment, and saw half her stuff missing. She'd already been over earlier, packing up clothes and essentials. Drawers open, closet half empty. A few bottles of perfume left behind, a couple of shoes tossed aside, but the intent was clear. She was gone. What she didn't realize was that she hadn't taken everything. She hadn't thought about the finances. Over the past year, I'd added her to my credit card accounts because she kept swearing it was just for emergencies. But emergencies somehow translated into Sephora hauls, Uber rides across town to see Jake, and late-night fast food binges. I tolerated it because, well, I thought relationships meant compromise. But compromise doesn't mean being treated like a wallet. So, I logged into my accounts. With a few clicks, I canceled her cards. Every last one. I even called customer service just to make sure they were fully inactive and not just paused. It wasn't even about revenge, not yet. It was about drawing a line. If she wanted to live with Jake, if she wanted space for a month, then she could do it without my money. The next few days were oddly quiet. No texts, no calls, not even a sarcastic meme sent at 2 a.m. like she used to. I went to work, came home, ordered myself takeout, and felt this strange calm settle over me. But calm never lasts. About a week later, my phone buzzed. Not a text this time, but a call. Her name flashed on the screen. I debated letting it ring out, but curiosity got the better of me. The second I answered, I was greeted with chaos. "The hell is wrong with you?" she shrieked. "My card just got declined at Walmart." In front of Jake. I had a whole card. People were staring, and I had to leave everything at the register while he looked at me like I'm some kind of idiot. Her voice cracked, and for a moment I pictured it perfectly. The fluorescent lights, the crowded checkout line, the smug, judgmental stares of strangers as her bestie. Jake realized she wasn't quite the independent, put-together woman she pretended to be. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Instead, I leaned back on my couch and said calmly, "You told me not to contact you for a month. I was respecting your boundaries." "That's not. Don't play smart with me," she snapped. "You know I need those cards. How could you do this to me?" "How could I?" I repeated softly. "You moved in with Jake, remember? You made your choice. Now you can live with it." There was a pause. I could hear her breathing heavily, maybe holding back tears, maybe just furious. Then she spat out, "You're pathetic. You'll regret this." And she hung up. I didn't regret it. Not one bit. In fact, as I sat there in the silence that followed, I realized something. This was the first time in months I felt in control. Not because I'd embarrassed her, but because I'd finally stopped letting her run the show. What she thought was a clever power move, vanishing into Jake's apartment, leaving me hanging, had backfired. Instead of chasing her, instead of begging her to reconsider, I'd simply let go. She wanted space? Fine. She wanted Jake? Fine. But she'd get all of it without me footing the bill. I had no idea then just how much that moment in Walmart would come back to haunt her. Because as it turned out, Jake wasn't the knight in shining armor she believed. And she was about to find out the hard way. After that Walmart fiasco, I thought she might cool down, regroup, and maybe even apologize. But nope. If anything, her pride doubled down. I didn't hear from her directly for another week, but I started getting odd messages from mutual friends. Screenshots of her posts. snarky captions on Instagram stories. Stuff like, real men don't cut off their women financially. That's abusive, by the way. Some guys just can't handle a strong woman choosing freedom. When your ex is boring and broke, but still thinks he owns you nail polished. Broke. That one made me laugh. She really thought I was the one struggling because I wasn't bankrolling her anymore. Meanwhile, she was living off microwavable noodles in Jake's apartment, pretending it was some kind of self-empowered adventure. I let her rant. Let her dig her hole deeper online. Because I knew something she clearly didn't. Jake wasn't built to play the long-term provider. From the outside, Jake looked flashy, new sneakers every month, a car he couldn't really afford, endless photos at clubs. But behind that facade, I knew the truth. Jake was broke. He lived paycheck to paycheck, and half the time his paychecks were advances from loan apps or borrowing from his own parents. And now, with her moved in, he had another mouth to feed. I didn't realize how quickly the cracks would start showing until one of my coworkers, who happened to live in the same complex as Jake, mentioned it casually. Hey, isn't your ex dating that guy who drives the beat-up Dodge? I saw them fighting in the parking lot last night. She was yelling about money. He was yelling about respect. I couldn't help smiling. It had begun. A couple of days later, my phone buzzed again. Another call from her. I ignored it. She tried again. And again. Finally, I picked up, more out of amusement than concern. Her tone was different this time. Not rage, not superiority. Desperation. Listen, she started quickly. I know things got heated before, but I really need you to help me out just this once. I'm behind on some bills. Jake's been struggling, just until we get back on our feet. I leaned back, sipping my coffee, and let her talk. She went on about how tough things had been, how unfair it was that her card got declined, how Jake was doing his best, but times were hard. She even tried to sprinkle in guilt, reminding me of everything we'd been through together. When she finally stopped, waiting for me to cave, I said simply, "You told me you didn't want contact for a month. I'm still respecting your wishes." And I hung up. The calls multiplied after that. First once a day, then 2, 3, 4 times. Texts, voicemails, even emails. Her tone shifted with each one, from pleading to angry to outright manipulative. One voicemail still makes me laugh when I think about it. "You think you're so smart, but Jake and I don't need your money. We're building something real. You'll see. You'll be begging me back when we're thriving." But if things were going so well, why was she blowing up my phone at 2 a.m. asking if I could just cover rent this month? The truth was clear. Jake wasn't stepping up, and she was realizing just how much of her lifestyle had been carried on my back. It all came to a head one Friday night. A mutual friend, the kind who always has the inside scoop, messaged me. "Bro, you're not going to believe this. She and Jake just had a screaming match at Applebee's. In front of everyone. He told her she was a gold digger, and she threw her drink at him." I chuckled. The image was too perfect. The bestie she'd left me for, the guy who was supposedly better, had finally said out loud what everyone else already knew. The next morning, I got a long, emotional text from her. It read like a confession and a plea rolled into one. She admitted Jake wasn't who she thought he was. She said she'd been confused and acting out. She insisted I'd always been the stable one, the one who cared for her. And finally, she asked if we could meet up just to talk. I stared at the message for a while. Part of me felt a strange pang of pity, not because I wanted her back, but because I could see just how far she'd fallen. She'd gambled her relationship, her stability, her dignity, all for Jake. And now she was trying to crawl back from the wreckage. But pity doesn't rebuild trust. I didn't reply. Instead, I screenshotted her message and filed it away, just in case she tried spinning another story about me later. Then I put my phone down, grabbed my bag, and headed out for a weekend trip I'd planned for myself. A little escape, a chance to breathe, reset, and enjoy the freedom she'd mocked me for having. That weekend, I took photos at the beach. Not selfies meant to make anyone jealous, just me enjoying life. Still, when I posted one picture of the sunset, I noticed something funny. Her username popped up in the views almost instantly. She was watching. Watching as I lived my life without her. Watching as I looked calmer, lighter, freer. Watching as her new chapter with Jake turned into a nightmare, while I quietly built something better for myself. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning of her unraveling. Because when someone's pride cracks, it doesn't shatter all at once. It crumbles piece by piece. And she had a lot more crumbling to do. Update 1. A couple of weeks passed after that Applebee's meltdown. I was back in my groove, working out again, cooking for myself, hanging out with friends I'd neglected while I was busy carrying someone else's weight. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was managing someone else's crises every day. But she was unraveling faster than I'd expected. It started with a barrage of texts that swung wildly between emotions. One morning, she'd be full of apologies. I made mistakes, but I've learned my lesson. You were the best thing in my life, and I was too blind to see it. Then, by evening, it'd turn into blame. You abandoned me when I needed you most. You cut me off like I was nothing. What kind of man does that? I ignored them all. I'd learned the hard way that responding only fueled the cycle. But then she did something that made me realize just how desperate she'd become. One Friday night, I was at a friend's game night when my buddy leaned over, scrolling on his phone, and said, isn't this your ex? He held up Instagram. She'd posted a long, emotional rant about me, tagging me by name, airing our dirty laundry in front of everyone. She painted herself as a victim, accusing me of being controlling, withholding money to punish her, and even hinting that I'd isolated her from friends. The comments were brutal. At first, a handful of her friends chimed in with the predictable, "Girl, you deserve better" responses. But then the tide shifted. People started asking why she was living with Jake if I was supposedly so controlling. One commenter asked, "Didn't you say last month he was your forever?" Another flat out said, "You sound ungrateful. Dude paid for your life for years." I didn't need to respond. She was burying herself. The next day, the post was gone. But not before dozens of screenshots had already made their way around. Then came the call from her mom. "Listen," her mom said, lowering her voice. "I don't know what's going on with her, but she's been calling us nonstop for money. She says you abandoned her. She says Jake isn't helping. We can't keep bailing her out. I just wanted you to know, whatever she's telling people, her father and I don't believe it. We saw how much you did for her." It felt strange, vindicating, yes, but also heavy. Her own parents were seeing the wreckage now. That week, Jake finally reached out. I hadn't expected that. A text out of the blue. "Yo, man, we need to talk." I almost laughed. "Need? About what?" I didn't reply at first. But then he sent another. "She's losing it, dude. Constant drama. Money problems. I can't deal. Thought you should know since she keeps dragging your name into it." There it was. The better option. The man she'd traded me for. Throwing in the towel. I didn't need proof, but that was proof enough. The next weekend, mutual friends confirmed they'd officially broken up. She'd moved back in with her parents temporarily, though from what I heard, even they were at their limit. She wasn't working steadily. Her social media rants had alienated most of her friends, and she was burning through what little goodwill she had left. That's when she made her boldest attempt yet. On a random Tuesday night, around 11 p.m., there was a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, there she was, disheveled, mascara smudged, clearly having been crying. "Please," she said, before I could even speak. "Just hear me out." I stepped outside, closed the door behind me, and crossed my arms. She launched into a full monologue. How Jake had betrayed her. How she'd been lost. How she'd taken me for granted. How she knew now, without a doubt, that I was the person who truly loved her. "I'll do anything," she whispered. "Anything to prove I can change. Please, don't let this be the end of us." I looked at her for a long moment. Part of me wanted to unload everything I'd bottled up, the humiliation, the disrespect, the way she'd laughed at me while perched on Jake's shoulders like I was some kind of joke. But another part of me realized I didn't even need to, because the truth was obvious. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt anymore. I was done. "You had your chance," I said quietly, "and you torched it. Go home." She reached for my arm, tears streaming down her face, but I stepped back. Then I went inside, closed the door, and locked it. She knocked a few more times, even sat outside for a while. Eventually, the sound of her footsteps faded down the hall. The next morning, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because she was gone, she'd been gone for months, really, but because, for the first time, I had closure. Not from her words, not from revenge, but from my own decision to finally choose myself over her chaos. And from that point forward, the only texts I ever sent her were 2 words long. When she asked for help, "Not happening." when she begged for another chance. Move on. When she tried guilt-tripping me with memories. Too late. Every time I said no, it was like reclaiming another piece of myself. She thought she could push me away, humiliate me, downgrade me, and still have me waiting in the wings. But when she finally fell, the only person there to catch her was herself. And that's when she realized she hadn't just lost me. She'd lost the version of herself that only existed because I carried her. Final update. It's been just over 6 months since that knock on my door. Life feels completely different now. Calmer, brighter, more mine. I've built a routine where my mornings aren't interrupted by frantic texts. My bank account isn't being drained to cover someone else's lifestyle, and my nights are filled with peace instead of anxiety. But those 6 months also revealed more about her downfall than I ever could have imagined. After I shut the door on her that night, I heard through mutual friends that she moved back into her parents' house full-time. At first, she tried to spin it as just until I get back on my feet. But from what I gather, it's become permanent. Her parents are exhausted, footing her bills while she hops from one half-baked idea to the next. Jake? Long gone. Apparently, he ghosted her completely after realizing she expected him to step into the same role I had: provider, emotional cushion, rescuer. He lasted 2 months before bailing. She tried dating again, but word travels fast in our town. People already knew about her social media meltdown, her constant begging for money, her public humiliations. Nobody wanted to sign up for that circus. One night, my buddy sent me a clip from TikTok. It was her, live streaming from her car, crying about how men are trash and how she'd been abandoned after giving so much of herself. The comments were brutal. Strangers pointed out the irony. Some even recognized her from the Walmart story that had gone semi-viral after someone recorded her scene with Jake. Imagine being remembered not for your accomplishments, but for screaming at your boyfriend in a checkout line because your sugar train had derailed. Meanwhile, my life was moving forward at full speed. About 2 months after everything ended, I booked a solo hiking trip, something I'd always wanted to do but never could because she hated the outdoors. I spent 5 days on trails, sleeping under the stars, and it was like pressing a reset button on my soul. When I came back, I started seeing someone new. I won't overshare details because she deserves privacy, but let's just say she's everything my ex wasn't: grounded, kind, independent. The kind of woman who buys her own coffee, who doesn't treat my wallet like a vending machine, who laughs with me instead of at me. The contrast was so sharp it was almost disorienting at first. I'd gotten so used to chaos that simple kindness felt foreign. But it's good, healthy, real. And as for my ex, the last time I heard from her directly was 2 months ago. She sent a long text at 2 a.m. I don't know how to live without you. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. Please, I'll do anything. I can change. I didn't reply, not because I wanted to hurt her, but because replying would have meant reopening a door I'd already closed for good. What struck me most wasn't the desperation in her words. It was the realization that she finally understood what she'd lost. But by then, it wasn't mine to give back. I'd carried her for years, paid her bills, covered her dreams, absorbed her insults, and brushed off her public humiliations. I was the safety net she thought would always be there. The night at Walmart, when her card got declined and Jake looked at her like she was an anchor around his neck, that was her first glimpse of life without me. Everything since has just been the fallout. And honestly, that's her burden to carry, not mine. These days, I don't dwell on her. She's a chapter in my story, but she's not the ending. I look at my bank app and see savings piling up. I look at my weekends and see trips, hobbies, laughter. I look in the mirror and see someone who reclaimed his dignity. She thought moving in with Jake was an upgrade. She thought cutting me off was power. She thought mocking me publicly was funny. But the punchline was this: in chasing better, she ended up with nothing. And me? I walked away with peace, self-respect, and a future she'll never be part of again. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's silence. It's building a life so far out of reach that the person who once mocked you has to watch from the sidelines, knowing they burned the bridge themselves. And that's exactly what I've done.